Hello, everyone. Addy Ads here, Attic and Skywalker, YouTube's chosen one. Welcome to a special edition of Addy Chats. Pepsi Watson is the topic, and I have a very special guest today, Mr. Chris Thrall. Chris, how are you
Yeah,
doing?
yeah, very, very well. Thank you, Addy. Good to meet you.
So we have a mutual friend, Pepsi Watson. And how did you come to meet Pepsi, Chris? Because I actually didn't know who you were until I saw on the hashtag on YouTube, actually, Free Pepsi Watson, that I found a video you did last week, I believe it was, on Pepsi. So, yeah, how did you come to know about or meet Pepsi?
I really don't remember. It was sometime after we both appeared separately on Sean Atwood's true crime podcast. And yeah, Pepsi's just that kind of nice guy that he's going to reach out to you and say hi, and that was it. And yeah, I thought, what a nice guy. Let's keep in touch. So I've been up to London to see him at his house, and we often exchange. You know how it is when you're kind of in the YouTube world. We're often exchanging messages, and now he's not in such a good place. Hey,
Yeah, unfortunately, he is not. For those just tuning in, or for anybody who has not seen my previous videos on Pepsi, he is currently incarcerated at HMP The Mount. He got recalled earlier this year in January, actually, about a week after I saw him on New Year's Eve. So I think it was 8 days later on the 8th of uh, January. Well, I guess that would be 9 days, is when he got recalled. So that is when I started doing update videos right about there on his status. And when did you come to knowledge of his recall, Chris?
ah, do you know what? I Off the top of my head, I can't remember. I saw some comment somewhere, like you do. Might have been on Twitter or uh, I think Sean and I had been in touch a couple of times because things weren't kind of looking good. Um, don't know if it might have been Sean that told me. Yeah, yeah, it's pretty bad, huh?
Yeah, and for those that don't know, I actually just finished a kind of promo I did where people who sent me messages on Instagram can send some books to Pepsi for free, and I followed up on that. Not all of those books were available, as the Mount only takes book orders from Waterstones. As far as I know, I tried to get them to, I tried to get Amazon to send the books directly to the Mount. They don't do that. Um, uh, Moreover, I couldn't send any books from Amazon to England at the moment. So I had to use Waterstones, and only a portion were available, but I did get those books over to him. It was like 6 or 7 books. So he should be getting those later this week, which is great. Great for Pepsi. And Chris, actually, for those that don't know, is an author of his own, in addition to appearing on the Sean Atwood podcast. And I saw both of your podcasts. I might be 3/4 of the way done with the second one on Sean Atwood's channel. And I really recommend that people go and check those out, because Chris's life story is truly amazing. He has a lot to teach to people in addition to being truly entertaining, and one of the more entertaining guests that I have seen on Sean Atwood's channel. So people go and check that out. And for those that don't know, Chris, how many books have you written, and what's the most recent release that you've done?
I've written 5 books now. I'm just finishing a 6th book. They really take me a long time to write. I've got ideas for probably 10 or 15 books in my head, but so Eating Smoke was my first book. That's my memoir of leaving the Marines and then finding myself down and out in Hong Kong. I was chronically addicted to crystal meth in what was called clinical psychosis, and kind of bizarrely at the same time I was working as a nightclub bouncer or a nightclub doorman on a nightclub that was run by the 14K, who were a big well, they're a worldwide crime family, but in Hong Kong they're called a triad, like a triad brotherhood. So that was my first book. Second book was called 40 Nights. That's about my recovery from this kind of these challenges that I had. I've written 2 fiction books about a fictional Navy SEAL, or a former Navy SEAL turned detective. I've written a free book called How to Write a Memoir. And now I'm writing the story of how in 2018 I ran 999 miles, pretty much non-stop. Just I slept at the side of the road, carried all my camping equipment on my back, and I ran 37 ultra marathons in 37 days from John O'Groats, which is the very north of Scotland. So that's the northerly point of Great Britain. Ran down into England, through Wales, back into England, and then all the way to what we call Land's End, which is the southern tip of our great country.
What did you do for food?
I started off just taking like rations in my backpack, buying stuff at the shops and cooking it on my camping stove. And then after I got about 500 miles, so halfway, I had something that we call a shin splint in the military. It's a fracture in the leg. So I had essentially a broken leg bone. And I had to get rid of a bit of weight then. Otherwise, I just wasn't going to make it. It was incredibly painful. So I had to ditch the food and the cooker. And then I just bought stuff in stores, as you call them, as I ran along. It was it was fine.
Wow, that is crazy story. And for those that are interested, I will be putting all of Chris's links in the description box below, all his books, including, you said, a free book, correct, Chris?
Yeah, it's either free. It's usually free. Sometimes Amazon charge like 99 cents or 99 pence if you're in the UK. But yeah, it's just a free book. It's called How to Write a Memoir. And I wrote it just to help those people that have always wanted to write a book, but they never really got around to writing it because they're procrastinating a bit, or they're not sure how do you write a book. So I've just put it all in. I made it really simple. It's quite an easy read. The first part of writing a book is go and grab yourself a beer. Then the rest is easy. No,
Yeah.
I'm being a bit, light-hearted, but I do suggest, sit down one evening, have a fun evening, maybe have a drink, and just write down or type up your memories on a computer. And the second you start doing that, well, you're on your way to having your first book written. Then it really is that simple. I'm a great believer in, you've got to take action, because if you don't take action, nobody's gonna fulfill your dreams for you.
That is great advice, Chris. And let's talk a little bit about your writing process, if we can, and how that developed from when you started initially to today. What were you starting to do initially with your routine, and what are you doing today? Are you a morning writer? Are you a night owl? What's your work ethic like in that sense?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, you're the first person. I've been writing for, oh God, for 12 years I've been writing now. Okay, I'm not a very fast writer, as you can see. I've only got nearly 6 books out, but you're the first person that's ever asked me about my writing. So congratulations. But initially, it's like when you start writing, you either get the bug or you don't. I think if you don't get the bug that you can see that you can do it now and you want to get that book finished, probably not really gonna finish it unless you're incredibly disciplined and you take things steady, which I'm not. Um, Once I saw that I could write and it read quite well, then I was just every day, all evening until I got my first book written. So I'd start off in the morning with a cup of tea, or I don't try not to drink coffee just for health reasons. And so I'd write all day long, write until the evening. Come 6 o'clock, I'd go to our supermarket and get some beers, and then I'd go back to the computer and used to smoke a lot of dope. Well, not a lot, but I used to smoke a couple of joints in the evening back then. And I'd just drink beer, smoke a joint, and just read through what I'd written all day and really enjoy it, enjoy reading my work and thinking this sounds okay, and I'd tweak it as I went, obviously, which is, as I'm sure you know, is called editing. And that was it. My book, Eating Smoke, was 2 books. It was big enough to be 2 books, 240,000 words. And I did that in 5 months. That's a lot of writing in a short amount of time. But then I had a problem that, like, I'm not good at English. I failed everything in high school. I took my English exams in the Marines, believe it or not. And I had to learn as I went. So I'm constantly going to the search engine and typing in, how do you use a comma? How do you spell this in this situation? And I learned that there's a whole set of rules behind writing. It's not maybe what you were taught at school or what you think it is. There's an actual set, like you build an engine, you've got to build it one way, otherwise it won't work. It's exactly the same in writing. Is you can only do it one way. You can't say, hey, I'm going to put my comma here. I mean, you can, but you're going to look pretty stupid, right? That's not to say when you learn the rules, then you can see where you can break them, right? And language is evolving all the time. Therefore, punctuation and grammar is always evolving. So what used to be where maybe you always had a comma here, just out of kind of etiquette, now it's more a case of, well, if you don't really need it there, you do away with it. So that process, Addy, took me another year and a half, believe it or not. So 5 months to write almost a book that's as big as 2 books, a year and a half to learn how do I edit this? How do I edit this thing, And I'm a kind of perfectionist, so I wanted to edit it. I didn't, of course, when you get a publishing deal, they edit it as well. But I wanted to make sure it was absolutely the best I could get it before it went off to somebody else. And that was it. I got about a year through that process, and I had a phone call from Hong Kong. It was a publisher who said, I hear you're writing a book about the time you work for the Hong Kong Triads. When you finish it, I'll publish it if you like. And that was it. That was my first publishing deal that I didn't even have to ask anybody. They heard through the grapevine that I was writing this memoir, and they approached me, Addy.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack there. And just a quick question: why do you try not to drink coffee?
So that's an excellent question. And out of everything you're going to ask me tonight, this is for the benefit of anybody listening there in America or here in the UK. If I could only give one bit of advice to somebody, and that's having traveled 80 countries across all 7 of these continents, it would be learn how your body works, learn your body's biochemistry, and learn about the pH balance that all living creatures have, which in humans is 7.25. And when you learn that, then you can start to understand that different foods that we eat have a different effect on the acidity in our body. And if you run your body too long or in its acidic state, then after a certain amount of time, you enter a state of ill health, whether mentally or physically. And then after a lifetime of eating that way, then you're going to start to experience serious chronic illness, the kind of things we die from, like your cancer and your heart disease and diabetes and this kind of thing. I've been doing this now for 17 years. And when your body is alkaline, and if you want to know, you're like, am I alkaline, and what does this all mean? Just go on eBay, buy some pH testing strips. They're about $2, something like that, maybe 3 at the most, right? Free delivery. And you put them in your mouth and you look at them, and if it goes red, you're acidic. If it goes green, you're good. If it starts to go bluey, then you're probably a bit too alkaline, right? And if you can stay in that green, and it won't surprise people to learn, how do you stay in the green? Well, you eat vegetables, you eat nuts, fruits, berries. You eat the sort of stuff your ancestors would have eaten for 1,000,000 years when they lived in the nature, you know. And it doesn't mean you can't eat meat or fish. It just means that you've got to eat stuff in the proportion you'd eat in nature. So stuff like wheat, where you'd have to pick wheat for like 12 hours long just to get enough to feed you and maybe your partner or family when we were hunter-gatherers, right? It's kind of unlikely you're going to spend 12 hours doing that, right? So whereas you can dig up a root quite easily, you can pick berries, nuts, and fruit. And when I say fruit, I don't mean like mangoes from Africa. I mean like apples and stuff you'd get if you lived in a temperate climate, you know, if you'd evolved in Europe, right? And I don't want to complicate people except to say just type alkaline diet into search engine. You'll get an awful lot of people trying to dispute it because, of course, they work for the medical companies, so big pharma. They work for the dairy company, they still want you to, you know, drink their milk, and they work for the farming industry, so the meat companies, right? But I'll finish by saying it's the single best thing I ever did in my whole life was to start getting my plate proportioned into alkaline. That means 1/3 meat and potatoes. Just 1/3 of your plate can be meat and potatoes. The rest has to be green, preferably green vegetables, because green is energy from the sun. It's called chlorophyll, right? So vegetables and other alkaline food. And if you want to know what's what, there's lots of charts on the internet. And the final thing I say is, since I've been eating this way, I haven't been sick for 17 years. So when everyone's running around worried about getting viruses, we kind of laugh at that in this house, you know, because it's never going to happen to us. Sorry. That's an alarm for me to go and tell my little one a story, but I can delay for a bit.
Oh yeah, we can definitely let you go, Chris.
Sorry, Addy, your question was, where's coffee coming to? Well, both coffee and tea are acidic, but coffee is way more acidic than tea. If you think about it, it's a red poisonous berry that grows in the jungle. It's a drug, isn't it? Because it, you know, has
It is a drug. It's a psychoactive drug, and that's
psychoactive
something
effect.
people don't often think about. And when you remind them of it, they get a little annoyed even sometimes. But yeah, I find, Chris, that when I'm exercising a lot, particularly cardio, not so much weightlifting, I can't drink coffee. Like as soon as I drink it, my body just it's just like starts to reject it. It's just like, you no,
Yeah.
don't do this, you know. And but if I'm not doing cardio, I'm not sweating routinely, I can drink more coffee, I find. But it also is somewhat inflammatory too. It increases inflammation, as far as I understand. But that was just a lot of great information you gave there, Chris, as far as alkalinity and acidity. And I would love to chat with you sometime soon again. We will let you go. Want to be respectful of your time. As I said before to everyone, we will be putting all the links to Chris's books and his channel as well. He is broadcasting pretty much every day, as far as I can tell, and he's got new videos all the time. Go check out his books. Go check out his new book, and hopefully we can chat again in the future, Chris, about your writing process and maybe a little bit more about your awesome life stories that you have.
Yeah, Addy, it'd be my pleasure. And, you're welcome on my show anytime. So when you hit the record button off, just stay on the line because I've got some things to ask you about sending books to Pepsi.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And if anybody wants to send a book to Pepsi, just send me or Chris a message. If you send me a message, it'll probably get read sooner. Chris is a very busy man right now, as many of us are, but he definitely has less time on his hands than I do. So just shoot one of us a message, and we will get you hooked up to send Pepsi a book. That being said, thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode of Addy Chats with Chris Thrall.